Okay, folks, let's get going. Chalo. आपको बना देते हैं हम उसको हटा देते हैं कॉमरेड हारून शरीफ wants to be chairman यार लोगों को ले जाना है हेलो कम ऑन जल्दी से यार सर
जी मैं चेक क्या कर रहा हूँ
जितने लोग भागे लंच के बाद सारों के नाम नोट कर लें इसको आइंदा से नहीं लंच देंगे ठीक है अच्छा चलिए जी नौशा बीबी शुरू करें
I would like to welcome everyone back to the third session. The title of this session is Technology, Administration and Documentation for Growth. We will be seeking answers to the following questions. There is a lot of noise on compliance and documentation. Is documentation too cumbersome? Are people not schooled enough? Can the current documentation drive ensure sustainable revenues in the future? Should there be a pace for documentation? Has documentation been adequately discussed and debated? There have been many claims such as the presence of $300 billion in Swiss banks that have been proven wrong. How can we manage this rhetoric? There are all manners of claims on tax gaps and filers. Should there be better research on these areas? Citizens are discriminated on the basis of being filer or non-filer. Does this impede transactions? Should such distinction be made in transactions and opening of bank accounts? If non-filers are deliberately kept out of banks and transactions, are we achieving the goal of whitening money? Should we have a self-assessment or an intrusive FBR? Can technology improve the tax system in terms of convenience and efficiency? Where do we stand in terms of technology use? What are the potential barriers to its adoption? How can filing be simplified, and can everyone be a filer? And lastly, what are the capacity issues in the FBR? How can these be resolved? The session will be chaired by Dr. Shahid Hafiz Kardar. The panelists include Dr. Haque and Dr. Jawad Aga from the previous sessions. In addition, we have with us Dr. Mohammad Ashfaq Ahmed, who is DG International Taxes at the FBR. Dr. Ahmed's doctoral dissertation explores into the elite capture and its interplay with the extractive function from the prism of state autonomy. To his credit are the World Bank Fellowship, Fulbright Fellowship, Charles Wallace Fellowship, and Hubert Humphrey. His research interests include extractive systems, state autonomy, state building, state capacity, peace building, and governance. We also have with us Ms. Clelia Montioni, who is a leading public sector specialist and has been based in World Bank Islamabad for the past 4 years. She has also served in European Commission. Her areas of academic interest include state-owned enterprises, public investment management, and revenue administration. I would request Mr. Shahid Hafiz to please take over the session.
Welcome everyone. I'll just raise 2-3 very quick questions and my own experience. I've often tried to understand what is adequate documentation. The simplest example I can think of what happened to me less than 6 months ago. I and some friends went to a restaurant for dinner, and all we did was that for some reason we decided to go Dutch. I said, okay, I'll use my credit card. And they all insisted that they would actually make online transfers to my account. The FBR insists that that is my income. The online transfer is now being treated as my income. Whereas I had been arguing with them, please give me cash. So I'm beginning to wonder what documentation actually means and the way the tax authorities think what documentation is. Second is this whole business of technology. You have IT systems, all tax collection agencies have some kind of IT systems. There are enough data sets. Can they read each other's data sets? Can they be integrated? I don't think we'll ever have one tax authority because not just for constitutional reasons, but much more importantly because of the lack of trust that exists between provincial governments and the federal government. So that mistrust will always be a constraint in moving. You could have harmonization of rates and so on, but I often wonder whether we will ever be able to have that kind of integration where there will be one authority. But these gentlemen who've been asked to speak, I'm sure have far more knowledge than I have. Should we start with first? Okay. Maybe now I'd rather start with Jawad.
A bit of a comment, thank you very much. A bit of a comment before I get on into the presentation, which will give an overview of the various technologies supporting in the present taxation system perspective, as well as what the futuristic views would be. Technology would be the application of scientific knowledge primarily, and its tools would be machinery, equipment, and various ICT-based practices internationally. Now, a lot goes on probably in these areas, but mostly in isolation. So, a lot of the tax picture is not at times even available with the public sector itself when we cross the lines. Some data may be lying with NADRA, some are at the FDR, some data would be with the FIA, some would be with international agencies, some would be available on need basis, but a holistic picture where the data is warehoused and could be mined on need basis is a futuristic plan. So another issue comes which we deliberate along the lines would be the technology without capacities, at times followance of best international practice or chasing a jargon. And a good example is when we talk about scanners, when we talk about QED technology or drone technologies. So scanners, we put in scanners to scan the baggage, but do we have the know-how to handle the scanned vision or the scanned image? Do we have a color coding library in place? We're putting one in place, but did we have one in place? So at times, chasing technology without clear-cut deliverables and a roadmap to it becomes a challenge. So let's move into the presentation of those thoughts. We're mostly pressed for time, so we'll just move on directly. This is just an overview of our trade as it has grown over the past years. So it's not been a very a straight line or a tangent, but ups and downs have come about in various years. Here is something before we touch upon technologies to use in our taxation system across the world. What is our standing in the cost-time comparison? So this is a study of the IFC in the year 2020 study. And this year, although we have improved multiple positions in the cost of doing business across borders, but our rates are still much higher in the region. It's $417 per TEU on this. Our exports time cost comparison is again higher in the region, 113 hours and 406 over there. So, of course, here I must state that at the import or export stage, the FBR's customs department is blameworthy only for around 17% of the total time consumed during these studies. So what are the challenges and showstoppers that would be there to the use of technology in working on various taxes or bridging gaps across the data sharing part of it? The public sector is weak, whether willed or skilled is a debate we'll go on into. The stakeholders' resistance, not embracing the change or resistance to change. Reform and automation and use of technologies is always painstaking and at times a low priority in organizations. Handling big data and analyzing it. The world has changed. We move into a big data area, and a lot of big data is available, but handling it, analyzing it. The port community system and the coverage, customs has covered at the FDR part of that. I was a part of it for a while, no more, but still that has been covered to an extent. There are too many cross-border regulators and again working in silos. So individual technologies, even if they have them, and data if not shared is not really worth it in the use of technology in the broader scale. What happens in our international trade? We have licenses, permits, certifications and others from multiple agencies, over a dozen of them, and around 2.4 million TUs. When they cross, you need 2.1 million documents to be processed or shared across the country at various organizations and from and to various organizations, whether it's the Ministry of Interior, Commerce, DRAP, APTMA, you name it, PSQC, ATDAP. So this is the quantum or volume of paper, and multiple photocopies are exchanged, as was being mentioned somewhere this morning as well during the session. At each stage, at each office, multiple copies are being exchanged. So technology really is not being shared at that level. And possibly if we plan to do, if there's a scheme to do away with this, we'll probably cut list fees as well. So a difference in understanding in all our sectors also arises between computerization and automation. So when we were documenting and working on our doing away with the paper-based system in 2004, there were 37 signatures and several, at least around 30 documents with each international transaction document, and more or less the same on the sales tax side, at least a dozen documents. If you file a return on manually, then each time you have to give your NTN certificate and multiple other certificates as photocopies. Risk management hardly exists in most of the public sector organizations for their business processes. The IRS income tax return filing system is online, but communication with the clientele probably isn't. However, the 24/7 availability and payment module is there. What happened is that we moved for best international practices, and then obviously ownership bringing in and the teamwork. So far, what has been linked so far, all these organizations are online with the FDR's automated system, and more or less these are the certifications they issue or the number of transactions that take place in brackets for some of the organizations. What systemic technologies, this is a perspective of what happened so far. What systemic technologies took place? The web-based filing system came about, then 44 odd modules missing in the system for international transactions have been added in last year. Data modeling towards predictive analytics has been brought in. So there's an artificial step towards artificial intelligence. It's not really fully there, but it's on track. Risk management working has been undertaken, various channels, 42%, 33%, different green, red and yellow channels while transacting internationally. Customs has a container security system. Scanning of cargoes is non-intrusive technologies in use. And now we are in the process of developing they were in the process, more or less, they piloted a color coding library, so that whatever is the image of the transaction, the scanned image is shared across the country at various destinations. For example, if goods moving in from Karachi to be cleared at Lahore, the image would be matched at Lahore and possibly intrusive inspections would be decreased. Tracking and monitoring of cargo exists, but is only there for Afghan transit cargo right now. It's been introduced at the reverse as well. But for domestic cargo movements, tracking and monitoring is not there. This is another technology of high importance which not only saves dwell time and protects against intrusions on the way or at the ports, but also supports in decreasing the cost of doing business. Track and trace was mentioned in the earlier session as one of the queries. Track and trace has been recently is on track, has been introduced in the inland revenues for tobacco tracking and tracing. Right now, there's a plan to move on to cement, fertilizer, beverages, etc. It has been rather slow. Of course, all these have taken their time and taken their toll on the taxation system as well as the ease or cost of doing business. But being on track is a plus at this, and with once the tobacco is experimented and moved on with, it shall be much easier, and there shall be domestic taxes shall be duly secured, just as the supply chain is being secured through tracking and monitoring system. Point of sale integration has also been initiated and is being spread out for the domestic taxes as using technology so that there's less of human interaction and less of discretion in these. Another project that has been undertaken last year at the FBR was for geo-tagging and geo-mapping of all businesses across the country, as well as for registration of new taxpayers. That way, when this exercise was triggered, it was found that no single organization, although in the Punjab an organization had mapped certain areas in 96 cities. However, that does not bridge in. The bridging in part is quite a large problem when you talk of bridging in not only domestic taxes, but the energy costs being incurred by the business, or the gas-related costs, or the water costs, or any of the costs, or any of the payments, or profits, or transactions. So in order to cover the transactions, it has been piloted to triangulate all the data and bring them up together. So what are the upcoming initiatives? To curb smuggling, QR coding, track and trace we've just spoken about, and drone technology are on the cards. Data warehousing, and more importantly, data sharing. In data sharing amongst public sector as well as stakeholders has remained and is still a vital area which needs to be addressed appropriately. So much so that there are data sharing agreements between the FBR's inland revenues as well as customs with multiple countries across the world, and data is shared with them. However, domestically somehow data sharing remains a challenge. Awareness amongst the clientele is another issue. Even when technology is being used, even when messages across SMS or across the internet are being shared with the clientele, awareness needs to be worked upon, and that is an area where in the realm of taxation probably the linkage and communication skills have not been very much updated or up on board to realize the dream. So, of course, stakeholder linkages forward and backward are also part of technology which would necessitate anything onwards. So what was happening was that earlier on, a major project that has been undertaken by this government and is a major would emerge as a milestone, that earlier on, this is how our trading and taxation environment operates, not only domestically, but also internationally. Multiple stakeholders talk to each other independently. This would be handled in the realm of the National Single Window, which is a project led by the Customs Department, undertaken by the FBR, which I was leading till 2 weeks ago. This environment would do away with bring in ICT-based technologies and do away with the individual paperwork, the number of photocopies being shared, the amount of dwell time being spent with each organization for each license or each certification, as well as the data required which may not be necessitated. So on need basis, the single window would primarily be a cloud, would house all the data, and it shall be shared on need basis directly from the cloud with the independent stakeholders, whether it's the banks, the public sector, insurance, transport, traders, or the domestic taxes as they require. This would be the model. This is the international best practice that we are following, and presently Pakistan is on track somewhere here between these two. The world's best model is using ICT and technologies for trading and taxation is Korea. India is somewhere here. Pakistan is right here, having completed our initial international taxation through the web-based VBOC Globe project and the RMS running. Now the intra within the agencies of the government, which are being brought on board through their business process re-engineering, and then we move to the port community system, national e-logistics platform, and all the stakeholders, taxation offices, as well as the other public sector like NADRA and others would be on board, and the port authorities, as well as the domestic taxation authorities, the provincial tax authorities would all have their particular IDs and passwords which shall be unique, and that shall form a domestic platform, and later on moving as per international best practice to the regional information platform, and that would help us reach there. Okay, another area for data sharing and which is required in the technologies is the establishment of a national targeting center for risks. At this, presently, last year we designated a particular space, and all these other agencies are to be available over there, have their kiosks, and all the domestic taxation agencies as well as the stakeholders would be available on board for targeting, because until and unless risks are spelled out and targeted, the whole ensemble of ICT and just simply collecting data is not really a panacea to all this. Here we just outline, so obviously use of technology cannot be denied, and it has its uses internationally. Reduction in dwell time, international transactions, Pakistan's image, standing, cost of doing business, burning dwell time. So what's the way forward? Way forward would be that we have a particular strategy in place, agreed by all, and the total picture, whether on the public sector or private sector, sit around a table, agree to the roadmap, and utilize the particular technologies and come on board. But over and above that, once all this is achieved, would be the sustainability of use of technologies, and that is only through quality assurance and feedback. I'll hold over here, and let's, as we move on, the debate would go.
Thank you. Leah, can I have a question? Please take the floor.
Your opening presentation? So, my presentation is really very short.
Speak into mic.
You said the purpose is consists of information technology in modern world. So this is a short presentation. Looks at the purpose and uses of data in modern revenue administration, and looks at some of the reforms already underway by FPR, and as well as some steps that remain to be taken. So the use of data has two main elements. One is to strengthen compliance control, and the other one is for compliance facilitation. These two are not mutually exclusive or in any way contradictory. So one purpose is to have data from as many sources as possible in order to conduct automated cross-checking to identify discrepancies and different patterns that may be indicative of something unusual and may point to tax evasion. Sources of data include the different systems that FBR already has. They include other public sector entities, including provincial authorities and federal government entities. They include withholding agents, which are mostly private companies, and they include foreign jurisdictions. Other sets of data can come from electronic monitoring of production, track and trace, which covers both production, dissemination, and sales, and the POS data that comes from retail outlets that the FBI is currently trying to connect to its systems. As I mentioned, another set of data that is transmitted online, and Dr. Ashad will tell us more about it, is the automated exchange of information with foreign tax authorities, as part which requires certain international agreements to be in place. Another way to use all this data is to combine taxpayer risk profiles. Risk profile would involve the record of the taxpayer in terms of past compliance, past violations identified, and it would cover all tax instruments and ideally the record of the same taxpayer with the federal Board of Revenue as well as provincial tax authorities, with inland revenue as well as customs. So there is a lot to be gained by combining this data and preparing risk models that integrate these aspects. There may be need for customization, let's say for customs purposes as opposed to sales tax. However, try to prepare a risk model using only income tax data or only sales tax data is very complete. So this work is more advanced in customs, as Dr. Javad mentioned. However, for internal revenue purposes, it is being piloted for income tax, and a lot of work remains to be done for sales tax. So this risk profile is one of the things that they inform is the selection of audit cases. It is a very good thing that FBR has done to move away from mass audits. So mass audits were based on some regulatory requirements that, for example, stipulated that if a taxpayer was late in filing, they would be audited automatically. This resulted in something absurd, which is at some point there were about 1 million pending cases of audits, when Pakistan has just over 1 million taxpayers to file and pay. So this makes meaningful audit impossible, and as a result, deterrence, meaning the risk of being caught and sanctioned, would be very low. Doing a risk-based selection of audit cases, on the other hand, means that there will be few audits, and this has two benefits. This is one is that it allows for much more thorough audit, comprehensive audit, fee-based audit, where auditors go and look at the entirety of the taxpayers. And that would involve not doing an audit just for sales tax or just for income tax separately, but looking at the entirety of the taxpayers' economic operations. The other benefit is that you have less legal audits and less disruption to the taxpayers, or less hassle for the taxpayers, which is a benefit in terms of facilitation. Another initiative is automated customs control systems, which FBR has started implementing at its land borders with Afghanistan with support from the ADB. And the World Bank will be financing similar systems for the seaports. What these systems enable is they very much rely on the data from the automated risk management systems, so that the cargo is scanned automatically upon arrival. The data is cross-checked with the information that customs has received the pre-arrival process, and then it is channeled to the yellow, green, or red channel accordingly. The goal is that low-risk cargo will go mostly through the green channel, and that will reduce the time that it takes to clear the border, to clear customs control at the border, and the associated costs. It doesn't mean that this is it and every, and then they are free to go. There is still the post-clearance audit process, which is again based on data analysis through the risk management system. In terms of facilitation, automation enables many measures that make the lives of taxpayers easier. Some of these measures that are already in place and they have been introduced mostly in the past year or so is online registration. Also now mobile registration is available for GST and WIPO. E-filing, also through mobile for some things, and e-payment of taxes through the online banking of various banks. And there are also alternative payment modalities through ATMs. In the future, it should also be possible to pay by credit card, as it is the case in many tax authorities. You may have seen that FBR achieved something that would have seemed rather difficult, which is the automatic processing of GST refunds through a system called Pasha. What this does is that it validates invoices for the purpose of verifying the validity of claims. And the most remarkable thing about it is that it works both for provincial tax authorities and for FBR without actual data integration. It means that the authorities are still not sharing full taxpayer data. However, because they are using the same platform, it is possible to do this kind of validation, which is a partial use of the data, but still it is useful. There is work ongoing on a single GST portal that will allow the taxpayers to file a single return for FBR and the provincial tax authorities. That is for companies and other service providers that operate across the country. It would be really a measure of huge impact because if the company now operates across Pakistan in Islamabad and the 4 provinces, it would have to file 60 returns a year just for the GST. So this would be reduced to 12, and the single return would go to all the respective tax authorities, and payment would also be online with the funds being channeled to the relevant tax authority. Before this happens, we need progress on GST harmonization, which I will talk about on the next slide. Another important benefit of advances in automation would be that the taxpayers should have access to their comprehensive records online, meaning that they should be able to log in with a password and see what their liabilities are, to take a look at what they have paid, to track the status of pending claims for refunds and so on. In the future, once we have an advanced level of data integration and a large volume of data from many different sources, the FBR would be able to move from self-assessment to assessment. And that would mean that for many taxpayers, especially salaried personnel who don't have many other sources of income, but also for businesses at least some parts of their income, let's say for the ones that are connected to POS, they would be able to benefit from a form they receive from FPR that says these are your known sources of income. These are your estimated inputs, deductions. If you agree, submit this and pay. If you disagree, please state the corrections you wish to make, and then that will go for assessment, cross-checking, and so on. This is used by some tax authorities, but here is probably a few years down the line. However, for many taxpayers, it will be good facilitation. Another program that is coming soon, thanks to the initiatives of Dr. Jafar, will be the Authorized Economic Operator Program or Trusted Trader Program for customs, which will accredit companies with no record of compliance. And some of these companies will be international operators who have this type of accreditation from customs authorities in other countries. So they will be able to obtain practically automatic green channel clearance, but they will still be subject to post-clearance audits. This program should eventually provide incentives for more operators to become more transparent. That means to provide more data on their operations, and to avoid practices that indicate under-declaration, misclassification of cargo, and so on, because it will save them a lot in terms of costs. So the idea is to promote good practices as well as accelerating clearance. So, what are the things that are needed in order to get there? On the technology side, it is relatively simple. FPR needs to have full connectivity for all its offices and all its teams, including mobile teams. They need to have the necessary equipment to be able to access the systems even when they are on the move. It also requires much higher data processing and secure storage capacity. Maybe not to integrate data with across FBR systems, so with the provincial tax authorities and let's say a couple of other entities, but the moment POS is rolled out to a substantial number of retailers and track and trace is in place, so there is real-time monitoring of economic activity. That will generate an exponential growth in the data that has to be processed in real time, and this means that FPR will require to invest both in physical data center, in cloud storage. Both systems are necessary for business continuity and security. Of course, it requires sophisticated business intelligence tools. Software exists, but there's a need for customization and, most importantly, analytical skills. I am happy to report that there are people in FPR who have these skills, but some of them, as elsewhere in the civil service, ended up there by accident, meaning they were not selected because they happened to have these skills, because they studied information technology. But in order for this to become a well-performed function, deliberate recruitment and hiring of people with relevant skills and experience is required. So, the set of data that initially needs to be gathered and put in a compatible format for real-time cross-checking needs to come from FBR subsystems that are not fully integrated, unfortunately. So there are several systems for GST, for income tax, for customs. Then there are provincial tax authorities, other government authorities, and data from the holding agencies. FBR legislation gives it, obliges other government entities and even private companies to share taxpayer data for the purpose of preventing tax evasion. But as many of you know, this is not in fact being complied with. So it is not clear what needs to be done. When it comes to FBR and other federal entities, it is perhaps a matter of the government issuing a decision saying that from now on all of you have to provide this data to FBR in a standard format without request for payment. One government entity is not supposed to charge other government entities for data that is legally supposed to make available to them. When it comes to the sharing of data between provinces and the federal government, there is no such legislation in place. So this will require agreements between the federal government and the provinces. And these agreements should incorporate some provisions that unfortunately do not exist anywhere in legislation at the federal or provincial level about data protection, data security. These are two different things. One is to do with the authorized use of data to protect the privacy of this information so that it is not sold or used for illegal purposes. And data security is a matter of IT security so that the data cannot be hacked, leaked, lost, and so on. This work needs to start as soon as possible. There are already some discussions, but it is not complete, and it is absolutely necessary for the GST portal to become fully operational. Other laws and regulations will be needed ideally before the data sharing agreements. These laws specify what data may be shared, for what purpose, should they have existed or should exist at the federal and the provincial level separately. But now this is becoming very urgent, so this is something that will need to be tackled very soon. Finally, automation and use of data is necessary for efficiency. This is more an internal process, so it does not directly impact revenue collection or taxpayer facilitation. But it enables, like in every organization, government or a company, things to be done faster, more efficiently, and to have greater accountability, because then no file can go missing. We don't look for files. It is clear who made this decision, who picked the button. Before automation of internal processes can start, the processes need to be mapped and they need to be redesigned in order to simplify them. Automating an inefficient process with redundant steps is actually detrimental. So when analysis that we have done has identified some 17 processes, some about a third are just for IRS, another third are for customs, and another third are joint. That need to be thoroughly mapped, redesigned to simplify, and then automated and rolled out, with the final step being the removal of the paper-based process. So I shall stop here.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll start off by appreciating the PIDE for the very title of the conference, Shifting the Paradox on Tax Policy and Administration. To most, it would read like just another conference title. Am I audible now? Yeah. Okay, good. Well, I'll start off by appreciating PIDE for the way they have contrived this conference title. And to most, it would read like a normal conference title, but to some, it's indicative of very deep-rooted, historically embedded paradox. And the paradox relates to viewing and conceiving tax administration only in terms of its one component, and that's tax policy. The paradox of conceiving the part as the whole. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I'll walk you through some virgin data sets, some disturbing data sets, and pose some questions without making any attempt to answer them, with the solemn belief that all good questions should be good enough to search their own answers. For those who do not know much about Federal Board of Revenue, Federal Board of Revenue is the house of the extractive function of the state. It was established in 22. It administers both inland and border taxes as per the constitutional arrangement. Majorly, it enforces income tax, sales tax, federal excise, and customs laws. And there's a overarching revenue division as well. How are we looked at as a tax system? At the intellectual landscape, generally there are two groups which look at us. There are growth mongers who just want to have and contrive tax policy and broadly economic policy which is pro-growth, and they tend to dismiss and forget all fiscal imperatives of the state. On the other hand, there are revenue mongers who are into brute revenue maximization, and they tend to ignore the economic imperatives. But how have we done? Didn't we do our numbers? Over the past 5 years, from 14 to 18, we did an extremely decent job. It was also claimed by the previous government. From 14 to 18, we almost doubled our revenue. We grew revenue numbers at a decent pace of 10.5% of the GDP. I'll finish up within 20 minutes. Thank you. I was given 20, but anyway, I'll rush it through. Are the numbers sufficient? As the chair is pointing out, due to shortage of time, of course the numbers are not sufficient. Are the numbers healthy? The numbers are certainly not healthy. Each time the state is at an inflection point, there's a expenditure to GDP ratio which is around 20%, and there's a tax to GDP ratio which is about 10%, and there is a fiscal stress line. State has two options. One is it can adopt a solid functional route. It can, capacitate its tax administration arm, its enforcement handle, or it can go the perverse way. It can get into withholding isolation. It can get into, raising fiscal deficit, indirectization of the tax system, which is of course not healthy. It can maximize on non-tax revenue, which is the order of the day. So forth and so on. Why aren't we creating enough numbers and in a healthy way? Because of the 5 P's of the tax system. And let me get to those 5 P's. First of all, I'll hit the cost of collection. To me, it's a very important agenda of state making in Pakistan. Let's have a look at these numbers. Pakistan's cost of collection from 2001 to 2018 in absolute numbers is here. The total allocation for Federal Board of Revenue from 2001 onward has been 25 billion in 2018. This is the last year that we have. On IRS side, we spent about 13 billion. On custom side, 8.2, and at head office at 4 billion. This gives you a better picture. As percentage of total tax revenue, you would see from tax year 14 onwards, the trend lines are on the receding course. Total 0.647% we are spending. We are given to spend. In fact, IRS is getting 0.337%, customs 0.213%, and head office decent 0.1%. Is that good enough? Probably not. This is the data of IRS and TCS, the cost of collection as percentage of their own respective revenues. Pakistan Customs was fortunate to do a decent job until 2014, when their cost of collection curve also collapses and it gets down to 1.3% in 2018. But IRS side, which collects about 80% of the revenue, probably they have been, operating under 0.5% of their contribution to total tax. Is that all? It's yet not all. The allocation of funds at the tail, where taxation actually gets executed. This is the curve. Large taxpayers office Islamabad, which collects over 400 billion per annum. Their cost of collection is 0.08%, abysmally low, which means that the chief commissioner who collects 400 billion rupees for the state only gets less than 1 paisa to collect 100 rupees. This is obscenely low cost of collection. Later last year, I was presenting this paper at a conference in Paris, and Chief Commissioner Islamabad was, designated as the most efficient tax collector in the globe. Is that all? It's yet not all. If you look at the gentleman only gets, in fact, 0.21% of 0.8% because the rest is all wages. He doesn't have any revenues to undertake revenue operations. You must have talked about policy, tax policy in the morning session. I'm just trying to highlight some policy-induced drags on the administrative structure. We still have, on IRS side, we still have 3 tax laws. They could be harmonized into one. They create a lot of confusion, not only for the taxpayer, for us as well. There's an inverted concentration of legal powers and functions within the laws. There are so many special tax regimes and boxes that have been created. There are hyper-interested groups which create special boxes and special procedures at a tracking pace. Tax administration actually falls behind all the time, always. And there are mistiming between tax administration's budgeting and tax policy formulation. What I mean to say is that our budgetary estimates go in March, our first week of April, but tax policy proposals are finalized at the budget time. So we have already missed the bus. Procedures incoherent, yes, and that has happened majorly because of the IT. We could not keep pace with the IT. Our manuals are outdated. In fact, our IT platforms are outdated. Clelia has mentioned quite a few interventions, and hopefully when the funding gets through, more investment will be made into IT sector. There are special regimes and boxes which created, but those are not being catered in the IT system. And there's a non-functional fiscal justice system all along. I'll skip this slide. The workforce. We are a 220 million economy, nation, and we have total sanction strength of 27,700. Out of which only 20,600 have been deployed. HMRC, there are 60 million people, 60,000 workforce. Germany, 85,000 people, and no tax system can be more IT enabled than Germans and the British have. There's a perverted tax mix. What I mean to say is that the contribution of withholding taxes has, consistently gone up, but the contribution of the departmental officers, because of all these reasons, is abysmally low. There's a very small 2 bars at the bottom, which reflect the tax demand created and tax demand collected, and their contribution is as good as negligible. There's a politics of tax administration, which is a very important aspect of the tax system. Clelia mentioned some of the aspects already. There are multiple, tax administrations. There are 7 of them competing all the time and making the life of the citizen miserable. There's an extreme political partisanship on the extractive function. The course of powers have not been agreed upon yet. There's no broader consensus. There's the resource misallocation. There's no consensus on economic and fiscal transparency, and operational autonomy is missing. There has already been a word on harmonization. This is an important slide. I guess we all know what can the tax administration lead to, but what can it lead to the external sector that is generally not in our view. Pakistan has a massive offshore problem. We argue that incomes that get taxed never get hidden. They never cross borders. A weak tax system results in and leads to siphoning of foreign exchange from the economy. There are studies already. There are 10 billion which get remitted out legally, and there are studies which indicate that 10 billion US dollars get remitted out of the country illegally. Thus, in Pakistan's context, BOP is not a debt problem, it's basically a tax problem. Since tax system is weak, MNCs are the major beneficiaries, they get a walk in the park. This is the conclusion. This is the final massive question. Is the current system capable of sustaining a functional state by ensuring that taxation in accordance with normative principles of ease, efficiency, and equity? In order to address this question, I had to write this whole book. Falcon, too lazy to pray. Currently, we are in the left column, but we are unable to maintain a vibrant economy, a functional state, and a healthy society. In order for us to get there, we have to be in the right column. Thank you.
Ikram, deliberately kept you last?
Oh, yes. It is honor as well as quite challenge that when you speak at last, uh, speaker, so everything has been said already. But I have to tell very briefly today, in the end is that you have highlighted all the problems, and there is no need to repeat these again and again. But I want to give you, just in 5 minutes, the real problem behind is when you are talking about digitization, automation. Every country, perhaps we can take the example of one federation like Pakistan, Canadian Revenue Authority is a single revenue authority and it collects tax for all tiers of government. So this is one model. When you go to Sweden and you see they have an authority which is like Nadra plus taxation plus everything, because they keep every record of every person, so they don't need multiple agencies. So these two are best examples. But today I just want to concentrate on Pakistan and tell you that the main problem is that, first of all, unless we go for these two things, that we should have all Pakistan Unified Tax Service. Like you have Pakistan Police Service, they go into provinces and serve their provinces. Never ever they object about that. You have Pakistan Administrative Authority Service, previously called DMG, and they also work on all Pakistan basis. So what is the problem with all Pakistan Unified Tax Service? It should be a very, very vibrant service, and it should take care of, and you have all these digitization, you have automation, but behind that, what you are missing is that what is the constitutional perspective. I have just mentioned that Article 145, you don't need to have to even amend the constitution. Provinces can give this function by just passing resolution to the federal government. No, but it will be a federalized structure. All Pakistan Tax Service mean there will be a all Pakistan unified tax service. So they are shareholder of 57.5%. So why they are out of policy and collection machinery? So we should concentrate on this rather than entering into useless debates of 18th Amendment and what we have to do. The Constitution already provides the answer to that. So if you want to have an effective fundamental element of tax reforms, I have listed here, and you can easily see that my point of work is right on this slide, which I want that when we finish today's work, this article all of us have not noted, that after 18th Amendment, National Economic Council has become very important through yet not realized by the center and the provinces. Planning after 18th Amendment, which also going to include your tax, your economy, your everything, is not a centralized subject. It is a federalized subject now. And it redefines National Economic Council on the same pattern as Council of Economic Interest, and it is now part of specifically Chapter 3. I have written a new book, which hope to be, I hope that it will be published very soon, which is called Tax Reforms in Pakistan, Historical Perspective and Critical View. I have forwarded it to Nadeem. If they want to publish it, it's okay. Otherwise, my own publishing house will be going to, and I have taken all these issues in that. That problem is not that difficult that we are making. It's just mode and working of National Tax Agency, which can be discussed and finalized under Council of Common Interest, and its control can be placed under National Economic Council. And this view, which I and my wife presented in 2013 in a tax article titled "To Taxing," I was very encouraged that Tahir has also mentioned it in many of his articles, that this is the way forward after 18th Amendment to end fragmentation and to make the life of citizens as well as at ease, because now you are mentioning 5, and in fact my bank clients also file another return per month to AJB authorities. So in fact they are
to have to file like all the payments they collect on behalf of government every week. So this is 52. And then they have to file their own estimates of advance tax every month. Then they have to file 6 state tax returns and so on. So as we are calculating even in the World Bank ease of doing business, I have corrected this time and they have sent a letter of appreciation. Yet you have pointed out what the exact reality is. So with this, I will end and thank you very much for listening to my ideas.
Thank you, Ram. I'll open the floor for any questions. Keep them short, please. No statements.
We are in this session concerning technology, so I just want to concentrate on this. Can we have a CNIC-centric system where the income and expenditures, including sale and purchase of real estate, vehicles, foreign travel, utility bills, club bills, bank transactions, are reported to the FPR through the CNIC. Whether the individual files it or not, it should automatically go to the FPR. And once the individual then files his return, he should just have a look at it rather than doing all that paperwork. And every time you're called for audit, you're told to bring all those documents with you. So why not make the system technology oriented, make it easy for the taxpayer, make it easy for yourself, and make it better for the country. Thank you.
Next question.
Yeah, I have a question. I think most of these are directed to Ikram and to Jawad. And Jawad, pardon me for this. So Jawad, first and foremost, I mean, one of the things I would like you to comment on, and I didn't see that there, is the whole idea of the single window, the port community system. You didn't mention anything about the public sector, the private sector's appetite to actually uptake this. Because we've fallen down flat on our face for the last 20 years trying to do this because our state and everybody does not want to actually implement this. So any comments on that? Second thing is that this whole concept about big data, and this goes into 3 things, and my question on this is again directed to Ikram Saab, that when you talk of big data and single entity, and you talk of a single tax entity, I mean, would you like me to understand which model exactly is it that you're promoting? I mean, I'm really confused because customs is not a tax service. Customs is actually something that's related more to security, right? So the 5 models of customs authorities globally, including like the Guardia Finanzia, etc., they are very different to centralized tax systems. So I mean, why have you not talked about actually taking this function totally and putting it under policing or something like that? Third question is that a lot of people talk about filing probabilities. And I'd like someone from FBR to comment on the legal aspects of this because I think most citizens are not familiar that evading tax is a criminal act, right? So according to the penal code, you will therefore, if you don't file and someone infers, then you haven't really owned up. In other words, you haven't committed the act. So what's the clarification on that and all the stuff that you talked about?
Proper parliament should be behind that. Next question.
Thank you, sir. I have a comment on the Prashwant presentation that doubling of revenue over the last 5 years by FBR should not be seen as an achievement because it's mainly because of the overvaluation of the exchange rate that led to a high growth rate, growth of imports. And that has resulted in high current account deficit, trade and current account deficit. That is the story. I think it should not be seen as an achievement that they have doubled the revenue. Secondly, I have a comment on Celia about the enforcement of sharing of taxpayer data with FBR on banks. I think you may have noticed that FBR has been sniffing in the bank account of taxpayer. As a result, now we have a high currency in circulation. about 42%. The currency over the last 10 months, I think currency in circulation has gone up by 42%. People are withdrawing money from their banks. That is having an adverse effect on the banking system. Thank you.
Can I? Very quick question. Whatever I've heard from everybody on the panel has been really on technology, and secondly on the fact that there are FPR shortcomings in terms of data sharing, integration, coordination, etc. So I think it's all FPR shortcomings, not the shortcomings of people. But if you look at the title of the session, it's administration, documentation, growth. One thing that I haven't heard, or two things I haven't heard from people, is on documentation. Is this excessive documentation because of FPR's own failures, or is it just a problem? Second thing I've not heard anything about is filer, non-filer documentation, all the stuff that you've done to us, which makes it extremely onerous to do anything. All transactions on land, on other major transactions have stopped. Can you tell us anything, Jawad Saab, Ashfaq Saab, what is this? Do you really want to grind the policy, the growth of the country to a halt? Do you want this economy to grow at all? Is it all FPR failures that we have to take for?
That's the last question in this round.
Has the cost of collection been adjusted for the free service provided by withholding agents? That is number one. Secondly, I think the use of technology has actually increased the requirements of documentation. That is common experience. And this is a contradiction in terms actually. So somebody should elaborate on that.
I'd like to be entirely, because I'm suffering because of the technology that we file everything online, and I'm still asked to provide documentation. And that becomes a problem because then they ask for the originals to be sent to them and left there for 6 months. And there are multiple copies. Sorry, should we start with you first? There are all questions.
Sure. What you say is that you are right. However, it does not just the fact that people are hiding their incomes and are evading taxes, and now they are taking the money out of the banks because they are afraid that the banks may be forced to comply with legal obligations and share this information. It just demonstrates the extent of non-compliance with tax. Yes,
So what would be the solution? If they withdraw the money, how is it affected? It has gone up by 42%.
There is no one measure. First of all, actually, what the government should have done is instead of making noise about this, you enforce this in one go without making announcements. This is like the reverse of a tax amnesty. You don't talk about this. It doesn't make sense. And why do the amnesties not work? The amnesties don't work because there's no credit for risk of protection and enforcement. So, unless the people have something else that's better to do with the money, which so far has been sinking into real estate, because it's not taxed, or it's minimally taxed. Yes, so long as tax evasion is that pervasive, this is one of the effects. It's unfortunate. So the documentation drive has to have many aspects. One, the banks are one source. Then you have the telephones. You have all sorts of other things from the retail. It is actually, if you have a high level of consumption, the data exists. It just needs to be utilized and captured properly. And Dr. Ashfaq also has a full-time day job where he doesn't actually do this kind of interesting research, but he does actually very effective analysis of data received from overseas institutions, foreign banks that they don't understand the execution. So eventually, one will be caught. So it's a matter of time. Then there are measures, all measures have an impact. So when countries, for example, have imposed the use of credit cards on transactions over a certain amount. Yes, all sorts of fraud takes place. People pay at the table, they don't pay the sales tax or the VAT. These things happen, but it doesn't mean that we should allow this country to operate as if it was a tax haven, like Panama, where you put your money at the bank and the tax authority doesn't know. And with Qatar also this was. This is not
Julia, this is a puritanic, becoming too puritanical, right? Where's the growth at?
The growth arc, my dear. Huh? Kill the economy. You're saying that this economy cannot survive unless everybody disrupts the government? You're saying that the economy cannot survive, and this is blackmail. You reminded me of this retail. So anyway, I cannot tell you not to enforce the wrong laws, because people who are evading taxes will take the money from the banks. They will put them where? If you tax the real estate?
Would you want to respond to your question?
Yes. Yeah, you said that. Oh, it's the private sector on the issue was that does the private sector have an appetite for the Pakistan single window, which would emerge as a cloud-based data bank for all the organizations, public sector as well as private sector, as well as multinationals, banks, the port authorities, the taxation authorities, and the traders, to have access to their data and place their data on the cloud, which would be available to all the public sector as well as stakeholders on need basis. So yes, on the contrary, we found ourselves that the private sector has a larger appetite for coming on board on the IT-based solution and the use of technology. Slight problem that we did face when I was leading the customs at the FBR was that the public sector organizations like DRAP, the health authorities, the agriculture department, etc., were not very willing to go for their business process re-engineering, because that is a prerequisite to any automation initiative. And we cannot simply computerize, as I showed on one of the slides, the difference between computerization and automation. But now we've got them around, and the FBR was working with 12 organizations in the public sector, so they do have an appetite at that, and yes, it would be achievable. Target date is December 2021, so hopefully they'll be there by then. And one other issue came up, that technology has caused more of documentation. Well, not really, because if you take the examples of international trading like customs, previously before the automation of EBOC, etc. began, there used to be 7 or 8 copies of the bill of entry or the bill of export for any import or export, which were accompanied by roughly 1 dozen pieces of paper in A4 or A5 size along with that, and now it's all online. And so that, to a great extent, yes, definitely technology would ultimately be decreasing the number of papers aligned with it. Thank you.
Just talking about the private sector, I have a quick question to you. Why can't the private sector be used to provide scanners against a fee at the ports? I mean, you have scanners today which can actually scan 100 containers in an hour.
Yes. We scanners are being used, and at some places it's government owned, at some places it's stakeholder or private sector owned. And the private sector, like for the 3 ports at Karachi, which are operated by port terminal operators, they are using their scanners and they bill their clientele to a fee. Wherever government is using those scanners, the public sector does not levy a fee on that. And the image of those, as I said, that we ran a pilot on the scanners, and the image would be scanned and shared at the destination. So that is being done for all our exports to the US. The color coding, the image is shared directly with the US under the 48-hour rule, and the container is cleared here and doesn't get checked over there again. Likewise, when we are importing as well, the scanners are being used. There are certain scanners which inspect up to 60 containers an hour or even more per hour. Those can be used for different items, single item, similar consistency, standard frequencies, where there are multiple items in the mix.
Talking in terms of speeding up things.
Yes.
trade facilitation was one aspect.
That is on the agenda of our 5-year trade customs strategic plan, which has been put in place, and the private sector is supporting that, as well as
Give an
government.
example of non-transit trade. We drop a flag.
100% is
I know.
Yeah.
But if all is so well about tractors, how are there leakages into the system? So we start wondering what
That's
tractors
which for
mean.
smuggling. It crosses the border, it goes to the border, it crosses the heart. That is for domestic movement, which is not being tracked. Domestic goods are not being tracked and traced, which move from, for example, Karachi to Lahore or Lahore to Karachi. All the goods that move from any port for international transit are being tracked, and there is no bill, hardly any pilferage in
Chancellor, I think
It's
there was a
only
misunderstanding. Sorry to interrupt.
It's only reverse, which is a smuggling phenomenon. And when the cost of smuggling is lower, as we were discussing in the morning sessions, where the cost of smuggling goes lower than the cost of import, as Dr. Manzoor pointed
So the
out,
port-
that's where it gets smuggled. There's hardly any leakage here.
My question, Jawad, to you was not the private sector as you mean the little trader and the people who are already colluding with the powers to be. My question is, if you go to Karachi, until port gate, that's the first signal Bebop issues, right? And even on Bebop Globe. What happens until the thing gets to port gate, when it gets discharged from the vessel, is the port community system, which is not being implemented. SAPD doesn't want to share the APIs, they have all the data. Now what confuses the hell out of me and has done so for the last 30 years globally, and especially in Pakistan, and you know this because this has been my diatribe for 20 years. We say this data is protected. Every shipper and freight forwarder and lines has all the data about everything they're carrying because they're protecting their profit margins, right? So what's so sacrosanct about this? Why is it that the Pakistan Customs is not able to tell SAPT, KICT, PICT, QICT that they want pre-port gate data reconciliation on the same day, which can be done today? I mean, we can have this offline, but I mean, that's what I meant. There's no...
Separately, but we do get captured, FBR captures all the data on it. When I was talking about National Tax Agency, of course, in the countries I have mentioned, custom is always different because India never ever have a single board. They have a tax board and custom is always a separate thing there. So when we are talking about National Tax Agency, we are talking that this fragmented taxation at provincial and federal level, even one agency can collect motor vehicle tax because you are facilitating the people. You isn't just to go me online, give my car number and just to pay there. So what is so difficult about this? Well, I was wondering that we were talking so much about digitization and automation as if we are doing something wonder in 21st century in Pakistan and the others have not done it about a century back. So that is not the debate. The debate why I initiated was that your supreme law of the land facilitates it. The only thing it's lacking is either understanding or will to do it.
Yeah. A few questions which were addressed to me are the Federal Board of Revenue. Yes, the CNIC is already in use for individuals. Dr. Talatangar's observation was spot on. I only mentioned it, and it was with a kind of casted tinge. It was claimed as success. It was in fact not success. Had it been success, it would have sustained. It didn't sustain. That's where actually I built the argument that we neither collect sufficient revenue nor healthy revenue. And that actually connects with Dr. Haque's question of filer and non-filer. See, any normal tax machinery wouldn't do that. We say it's for documentation, primarily it's for revenue generation. If we had, wherewithal, if we had the capacity to pinpoint and undertake differentiated taxation, the gentleman who was supposed to pay 100, we would take 100 from him, and those who were supposed to pay 5, we would take 5 from them. But what we do is, since we do not have the capacity to undertake differentiated taxation and go after the person who is liable to pay 100, we say everybody in the hall should pay 10. And that is the fundamental problem. That's what I call withholderization of the economic system. That's where actually not only incomes, but we have gone on to transactions that we have hit. And that is what has shackled the entire economy. The transaction in the economy is not taking place. And that is where it connects back to my presentation. You have to build the capacity. You have to build, you have to have a normal functional tax system. Otherwise, you have nowhere to go from here. Cost of collection, yes sir, you're spot on. Somewhere around the 90s or early 2000s, yes, it was a deft move on the part of maybe, now I'm not being a civil servant, on part of the elitist state. They actually shifted the revenue collection very deftly from their own shoulders to the citizen. Citizen actually collects major part of the revenue which appear claims. I hope I don't get quoted, but that's a fact. I'm in media. But that remains a fact. Then that remains a fact. And your point is very well taken and it's spot on. Thank you.
Second round of questions.
We are talking about technology, so we are experimenting with certain technologies, and now the world is experimenting with blockchain technology and distributed ledgers, where you can share the documents without even being any security is there. So when we'll start on blockchain technology and distributed ledger in FBR, when people will, I guess, will be shifting some other technologies, we will start there. So is there any plan of introducing blockchain technology and distributed ledgers in FBR?
Well, only, yes, good question, but I think our first, milestone is to start using, copyrighted, software and operating systems.
Wait for top 3.
Right, sure. I think let me just quickly summarize, try my best to summarize what I heard. One was this whole question of the extent of privatization for technology, the political economy of adopting it. We all know the reasons, not just the skill requirement, and of course, much more importantly, the public sector career paths. So if I join you, you can't pay me, obviously, market salary, but there is a question of career paths. So that's one. Second, Ijaz has already raised it, which and it has been answered, which is about the blockchain technology, so I won't repeat it. Secondly, much more importantly, you need to fix the processes, the business processes, and so on. As Jawad Sahab very rightly pointed out, you're either automating or are you computerized? And that, to me, is the key, which also depends on the quality of the documentation that you look for. What is adequate documentation? There are multiple copies. I don't know what is good enough as documentation, because that's all linked to the business processes. The frequency of data that is required and reporting, which means you need to change not just the processes, but much more importantly, the laws, the rules and the regulations that support it. The number of layers of processes, you know this better than I, especially when you, as you rightly reminded us, are not going to use risk-based assessments. Sharing of data, and then there is data and there is data. What is a reliable source of data? I mean, if FBR is beginning to tell me what the price of my plot is, rather than Zameen.com, then I'm really worried. So this whole question of the source of data is also, I think, you mentioned the capability of data mining, data analytics is now a totally new field, requires a fair amount of effort and skill sets, which frankly are in short supply in the country as it is. I mean, I see a lot of young people now beginning to acquire those kinds of skills. So a lot of work needs to be done, and of course, certainly no one will deny that some steps have been taken. FPR, in fact, for a very long time, Rod had been in was certainly in place, but succeeded in making very little headway. And certainly over the last, I would say, last 3 to 4 years, fair amount of headway has been made, particularly, as you mentioned, the whole custom side has been done a far better job. Some work has begun also on the tax side. Particularly, I find it amusing that if someone buys a mobile phone and you get an SMS that you're likely to be disconnected from the system because you haven't paid your duty on it. So yes, some successes have been done. So full credit for and congratulations for some good work that has been done, and I think we need to build on it. And hopefully it will be done in track 3, or will it be 4? Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause.
Thank you. Okay, folks, we're into the final session. We won't take very long, 15 minutes or so. We'll try and end it. So very quickly, we've got a bunch of people who will be taking notes. They'll summarize each session. Sabha, are you ready to do that? Yes. So we've done. Session 1.
So I'll quickly go through some takeaways from session 1 and 2, and the third session will be covered by Dr. Kardar. The key takeaways are as follows. The policy is presumptive, it's not research-based. There is no debate and research on any subjects or key issues like simplification. When it comes to research, the data is usually not shared by FBR. When we keep on talking about the revenue side of the taxes, we should also look into the way those revenues are spent. The brutal side of the government is financed by these taxes. We also need in-depth study of SROs. Then Dr. Ramulak mentioned that the taxation is in isolation of constitution. There should be a national tax code. Broadly speaking, there are low rates, broad-based tax policy should be adopted, and simplified procedure should be encouraged. Dr. Athar mentioned that revenue should be a byproduct with growth as the primary objective. The basic objective of the tax policy should be to facilitate transactions. But we also came to know that there is a strong disagreement within FBR from policymakers to field operations staff. Who is to be taxed and how much? Sectoral analysis is required. There's poor state of data in FBR. However, people from FBR, like Dr. Hamid, told us that they are going for full tax, full refund policies, as tax exemptions are not enhancing investment, and the cost of presumptive and zero taxes is very, very high. There is crony capitalism and elite bias in tax policy. This country is low compliance country. FBR is short-sighted, does not take into account long-run perspective, and there is a need for collaboration with academia on issues like taxes. Tax centers can be established. From session 2, our key takeaways are that the policy is completely off track, not opening up, hence we are not integrating well. There's pseudo taxes also, like withholding, etc., other than customs that are impeding growth. Inter-industry argument has failed. Effective tax rates are pretty high. Reliance on domestic taxes is required rather than only on international taxes. Agriculture, health, industrial, all policies should integrate to achieve the objectives.
Thank you, Sabha. I have not made slides, and most of the points have already been taken up by Narsa, but still to go through this session as a wrap-up. The first presentation by Dr. Jawad basically shed light about the progress, especially what's happening in the FPR from a very tech-based perspective. And the context was basically that it's a kind of a win-win situation because it helps both the tax administrator and those which are basically engaged as the taxpayers. And they have already done certain experiments on certain issues such as track and trace system related to the tobacco, and hopefully it is going to be taken to the other sectors as well. And in the end, he talked about the future roadmaps related to the data warehousing, data sharing, and other perspectives. In the next session, we had Kaliya, which rightly talked about how the IT-based compliance can help us both from the control perspective and facilitation perspective.
And she talked about how the FPR is going on with certain reforms and how it is helping to achieve this objective. And then the third presentation was basically about the tax administration from Dr. Muhammad Ashraf. And he very rightly pointed out the context of administration from the historical perspective, starting from the policy-induced drags on the administration and the multiplicity of the tax laws and the non-adequate number of the tax administrators within the system, how basically that is creating a drag in terms of the policy. And finally, the point which he made was that the crisis in terms of the external side, the balance of payment, is somewhat also to do with the weak tax administration. So that is something which we can really work on. The last presentation was from Dr. Kram, which talked about, again, having a national tax administration setup. And for that, the law clearly spells out the procedures under which a unified tax system, tax group can be created, which can basically facilitate all the tax administration and policy perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just say that within a week or so, we'll have something like this as a management conference. But we do believe that we should put everything before the audience. One or two things that I'd say, I mean, we mentioned TARIFFS 2, but I noticed there's nobody from TARIFFS 2 here. There's nobody from TARIFFS 2 here.
There's no half to.
There's no TARIFFS 2, isn't there TARIFFS 2?
No, it's from Pakistan raises revenue.
Okay.
That is
There's nobody from Pakistan raises revenue here.
That's me.
There's just you. Okay, good.
I'm the trustee.
Great.
They implement in entities.
Wonderful. Okay. So the other thing,
It is different from part 2 in a one very important way.
No, fair enough. We'll talk about that.
It's results based.
Good. I'm happy to hear. The only thing that I want to point out is that how many people think donors should be here, listening to us, interacting with us? Raise your hands. How many people? Was only a few of you? Then they're good, then they don't show up. Good, then we don't need them, right? Because quite frankly, people don't want to talk to you. They don't want to talk to us. And no, people don't also want to talk to us. So that's great. Anyway, let me just say quickly in conclusion, all that I heard today convinces me of something that is very important. At the heart lies our system of administration. It is not that the people are tax cheats. I resent it when we are told that we are a non-compliance country, we are no tax cheats. I think I'm going to take this petition to the Supreme Court and ask them to tell everybody who said that to prove their point. There is no tax compliance here. What I've heard here is that our systems are not working. There is no data integration. There is no desire on the part of anybody in the system to learn, right? They tell me that they are fragmented. They tell me they don't share data. They tell me they have no research. All the research is outsourced. And their outsourced researchers don't show up to talk to the local people. So it's a bizarre system on which it is blaming the people for the failure of the system. And this goes back to my friend, your civil service reform, which unfortunately your task force was not able to do. I think that's where we are, that we need to build better systems in government rather than blame the people. It is the systems in government that are failing. People are right to take out the money from the banks because they do not understand what's happening. We have to communicate with the system. Teresa sitting here, when I was in the fund, we used to go to central banks and teach them, and tax administration, etc., that look, communicate with your people, take them